It's February, so that means it's time for the first What I Watched Last Month of the year. I started this series back when I first started my channel, but it never really got off the ground because I was always forgetting to do it, always too busy, blah blah blah. But I'm gonna start doing it every month of this year, or at least that's the plan. And starting with January. So here's everything I watched in January. To kick off the year, I watched Up. Now, this is a film that everyone seems to love, and for good reason. That opening is just incredible. It gets you feeling so many emotions in such little time for characters that we haven't really met yet, but it just does so much with wordless storytelling, and it's just amazing. In the past, I did think that this film was carried by the opening, but on this rewatch, I came to appreciate all the other elements. I love the imagery, the balloons in the house is just so iconic even from the first time you watch it. All the characters are fun. The conflict, whilst not being very original, is still just fun and interesting just because of all the talking dogs and Kevin and just the characters that play it, just so fun. Michael Giacchino's score, incredible as always. A memorable, fun, family-friendly animated movie. A curry rice. Next, I watched Intergalactic. This is a rewatch because I watched it when it came out last year. I just needed to watch it again because the animation is so good, the humor is so funny, and I just love a good rom-com. And to see it done in such an adult way whilst using the medium of animation is proof that animation is not a genre, but a medium and can be used in so many different forms. Yes, the animation takes inspiration from Spider-Verse, so I may be a bit biased, but other than that, the story's great, I love the music's incredible, but of course that's a given because it's Kid Cudi. Overall, just a really fun movie, not something you see a lot of the time, and I really hope we get more adult animated movies that take inspiration from this. A high curry rice. Next, I watched Casablanca, and I gotta admit, I wasn't really paying attention the first time I watched this movie. So for now, it's just a rice bowl, but we'll get back to it when I rewatch it in a few days. Then, on my birthday, I watched The Menu. I wasn't really expecting this movie to be as good as it was because I heard mixed opinions of some people saying it was really good, but some people saying it wasn't good, wasn't scary because they thought it was supposed to be like a real horror or something, or a thriller, and that it was just not serious. They couldn't take it serious. And when I watched it, I fully understood where the negative people were coming from, but those are the reasons that I love this movie. To me, this is more of a dark comedy than a thriller or a horror. Yes, it's got those kind of scary, tense moments, but it's trying to entertain you in humorous ways, and I do think it succeeded at that. I love the way it was shot, I love the way it was kind of parodying Chef's Table at times, I love the performances, Ralph Fiennes was amazing. It was such a fun movie, and I wasn't expecting it to be as fun as it was. So I would give The Menu a curry rice. Next, I watched The Box Trolls. I've been working my way through all of Laika's movies as of late, since I watched Coraline in theatres a couple months ago. And whilst, in my opinion, Box Trolls isn't up there with fellow Laika movies such as Coraline or Paranorman, I did really like it. It was funny, I liked the voice cast, I loved the animation as always because it is Laika, and that end credit scene was very funny. So, overall, I'm not sure whether I'd watch it again anytime soon, but I did have a fun time with it. A middle-of-the-road rice bowl. Then I rewatched Casablanca, and this time I paid full attention and I actually liked it. The score is really memorable, the use of music in this film, it's tied to the narrative and the characters of this film very effectively, and for that reason it's very memorable. The camera movements and the cinematography in general is very interesting and very, I guess you could say, ahead of its time for a classical film of the 40s. And being a propagandist war film, it doesn't really feel like propaganda because I enjoy that they push the romance to the front of this movie. So that becomes the focus instead of just another war film of the time. The performances are really special, I feel like they're very effective, and everyone seems to be like, they feel like real people. So overall, I'm very glad that I paid more attention to this film the second time I watched it. Curry rice. Then I watched Aftersun, and this movie is just incredible. I feel like there's not a lot I can say that hasn't been said already, so I'll keep it short, but everything about this movie, especially the performances and just the pacing and the way everything plays out, it's just so amazing. This is like the most real a film has ever felt to me. Everything felt so authentic, and I feel like that's helped through the framing device of the camcorder and these memories, and it just feels like you are peeking into someone's brain. So like I said, I'll keep it short, but it's just as good as anyone said. So if you haven't watched it, please watch it. It's just so good. A definite rice ceremony. Then kicking off one of the most jam-packed weekends in film I've had in years, I reckon, we've got, on the Friday, Evil Dead 2. I watched the first Evil Dead last year on Halloween, and I enjoyed it, but I wasn't really feeling all the campy vibes that everyone always talks about when they talk about Sam Raimi's old horror work, specifically Evil Dead. But then, when I watched Evil Dead 2, I fully got it, and I fully loved it. This is just so over the top, so campy, so fun, and yes, it doesn't scare me, but I still love the horror elements. The gore is amazing, just all these special effects that you can tell were done on a low budget, but I think that makes it so much more authentic and fun. The comedy is so good, and Bruce Campbell is just amazing as Ash. His physical comedy, we'll see it more in Army of Darkness, but it's just so funny and so good. So that's a definite curry rice. Then, right after, I watched Army of Darkness, and I loved it even more than Evil Dead 2. Now, I can understand why some people would think this is going a bit too over the top and a bit too, just jokey, but personally, I really like that. Everything was so funny, everything was so silly, the action was actually surprisingly good for such a funny movie, like I said, and I just feel like this is the height of Sam Raimi camp, and I now understand just the love for that side of his filmmaking past, the Spider-Man trilogy, which is really all that I'd ever seen from him. So yeah, not a lot to say. Army of Darkness, so fun, so funny, great. Now I'm an Evil Dead fan. Can't wait for Evil Dead Rise. A high curry rice. Then, continuing my weekend on Saturday, I watched the incredible Decision to Leave. This was my first experience of Park Chan-wook's amazing filmmaking, and it just took me by surprise in a sense by the fact that I've never seen anything like it. It was so stylized, yet not feeling too over the top like some people might feel with something like Tarantino or Edgar Wright. He knows how to balance being unique and being memorable and being, stand out. And the main two actors definitely sell that the most. I wasn't expecting a romance when I was going in, but they made me believe it by the time that I finished this movie. It was just so good, so thrilling. I love a good detective movie, and this just did that for me and more. So amazing ending as well. So definitely a high curry rice. Edging onto a rice ceremony. If I watch this again, it's probably going to end up being a rice ceremony. Then, Saturday night, edging into Sunday morning, so I'll count it as Sunday, I watched Under the Silver Lake. This movie has such a cool vibe that I like, and I think it just comes from the LA setting and all the mise-en-scène they use. So the costumes and the sets feel so LA, and it looks like it's from the location. So yeah, that's gonna come with it, but they just captured like this feeling that just felt like I was in LA watching this movie. So for one, even if the movie wasn't very good, I would have just liked that feeling of being in LA. But I really loved the mystery in this movie. Yes, the answers didn't really fulfill me as much as I would have wanted, but I kind of feel like that's the point. And it kind of works with what the character's journey ended up being, that in the end, it wasn't like as fulfilling as you would want. But that being said, it wasn't bad. I wasn't disappointed. I really like the journey up until the reveals. I enjoyed it was just a fun movie. I did figure out one of the little riddles right before the main character did at one point, and I felt so smart. So that was fun. I love films where there's lots of riddles and puzzles and you get to join in and kind of feel like you're there with Andrew Garfield figuring out this mystery. A fun, memorable watch, a curry rice. Then, finishing off this long weekend of film, on Sunday evening, I watched my second Park Chan-wook movie, Oldboy. Now obviously I've heard so much about Oldboy over the years, and specifically that amazing fight scene, because it is amazing, that has inspired so many more shows and movies across the years, and for good reason, because that was so memorable, so visceral, it was just so good. And the rest of the movie it's even better. It's even better than the main thing you hear, because this is the best revenge movie I've ever watched. It's got one of the best twists I've ever seen. I was not expecting that, and it shocked me to my core, and it's scary. It's a scary twist. The score is amazing, the acting's amazing, the cinematography and the camera work, as always with Park Chan-wook, is also amazing. The editing's great. There are some really fun editing moments where it just sells the film. The film is just so good. A definite high curry rice, also edging into Rice Ceremony. A few days later, I watched Titane. Yes, I did look up how to pronounce that. It's French. I don't speak French, so of course I did. This movie was weird. I'm not really sure what to say about it, but it looked nice. The body horror was good. The music was good. It was very chilling. I don't really have anything to complain about, so that's why it's at a curry rice. Then, right after, I watched my final Park Chan-wook movie of the month, The Handmaiden. I'd also heard of this movie, and I didn't realize Park Chan-wook directed it, and it was really good. I loved the set design and the costuming. It made me really feel like it was at the time it was set. The characters were good. I will say, I wasn't really feeling it as much as I was Decision to Leave and Oldboy throughout, but by the end of the second act into the third act, I was loving it. So it really pulled it back around. And so much so that it pulled it back around to a high curry rice. So that says something. Then I watched Puss in Boots to prep myself for Puss in Boots The Last Wish, which comes out February 3rd in the UK instead of the December release that everyone else got, or at least the US definitely got. Which annoys me because I've heard so much about the movie since, which has hyped me up, but also I've had to avoid spoilers, avoid clips, avoid discussion, and I really hope by the time I watch it, the discussion hasn't died down. But anyway, Puss in Boots 2011. I feel like this movie is very underrated, because all I've heard is people being like, oh, why would they make a Puss in Boots sequel? And then when it came out, oh, it's actually really good. Or, this way better than the first one, blah, blah, blah. And yes, the animation might not look as really cool as The Last Wishes does, and I can't wait to watch it again anyway. But, for a DreamWorks movie at the time, this is what they all look like, so you can't hold it against it. The story, the humor, the writing, the editing, it's really fun. Everything that I just listed is really good. And it surprises me because people act like the new one, I haven't seen it obviously, but it's the only one that has all these comedic elements and these kind of like adult humor and just the kind of vibe that you don't really get with animated movies. And I feel like this movie has that, and it makes sense that The Last Wish has it because it's a sequel, not because it's reinventing. So, Puss in Boots, really fun. I love the action, I love the humor, the visuals, whilst not being this really cool animation style that I can't wait to see once again. I know this is like a weird review of Puss in Boots, but also me just saying I really want to watch The Last Wish. But anyway, underrated I feel, actually really good. A good curry rice. And The Last Wish review will be my next video. Next, because the Oscar nominations came out, I watched All Quiet on the Western Front. I wanted to catch up fully on all the Best Picture noms, and I already watched Avatar: Way of Water, The Banshees of Inisherin, and Everything Everywhere All at Once. I'm not the biggest fan of war films. I like 1917 and I love Saving Private Ryan, but I haven't really watched a lot past that, and that's because I'm not really jumping at the bit to watch them. I also like Dunkirk. But this was really good. It was very visceral, it was everything that a war film needs to be. It was very realistic, it hit hard, the action was, I don't know if you could say good, because I don't want to seem like I was like loving it because it was really fun, but the action was good in the sense that it was realistic, like I said, and it like hits hard and makes you feel like, wow, war really is bad. So I get why I was nominated for Best Picture, but personally it wasn't like anything very special to me, but the production was very vast and grand and good in that sense, so I can kind of see why. So I would say it was just a good curry rice. Next, I watched Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. And yeah, of course, first month of the year, needed to rewatch Spider-Verse because I thought it'd be funny if one of the first movies I watched was my favorite movie, once again. The movie that I go on about way too much, blah blah. It's still good, I don't need to tell you that. It's a rice ceremony, moving on. Then, because I was watching my DVD of Into the Spider-Verse, I watched Spider-Ham Caught in a Ham, the short made sometime after Spider-Verse. This was fun, nothing too special, but I really liked the 2D animation and it was cool seeing more of John Mulaney Spider-Ham past the small part that he had in the movie. A decent rice bowl. Then I rewatched Do the Right Thing. I appreciated this movie a lot more than when I watched it a few years ago. And for this being Spike Lee's second feature film, it feels like it's made by a director who's had years worth of experience in the craft, because this film is so stylized, so unique, and so memorable with its camera movements, cinematography, color, and sets that Spike Lee's so defined as a filmmaker so early in his career, which is very impressive. I also really enjoy the way that this film is set on one day, and that the passage of time is felt without the movie feeling boring or too long, which is very interesting because the film presents characters that are bored and want the day to end, but we don't feel like we want the film to end and that the film is boring, which is a really cool, juggling of how you want to feel like the characters without feeling too much like the characters. So I feel like that's a very underrated aspect of this movie that Spike Lee had to really think about, I'm assuming, and that he pulled off really well. So overall, I would say this is definitely a curry rice. Then, last but not least, I watched Megan, or as I like to call it, Mithrigan. If you haven't watched this movie yet, do not go in expecting a serious horror film. Expect an over-the-top, comedic, campy horror. I know this style of over-the-top, silly film isn't everyone's, but for me, it works really well. Having the same writer as Malignant is definitely a strength because I love that and I love this movie. James Wan's directing is sorely missed, but it doesn't really matter because to me, I'm not really coming into Mithrigan for expertly crafted Oscar, winning cinematography. So overall, it was a funny movie. It actually had me laughing out loud a lot. And I will happily watch Megan 2.0 when it comes out January 2025, which is a while, but however long it takes them to make Peak Part 2. That's a rice bowl. And that about wraps it up. I watched a couple of shows during this month. Alice in Borderland Season 2, The Last of Us started, both really good. Last of Us is looking to be a top tier show of all time. And yeah, really good month for movies for me. I'm glad I got off to a bang with the year with a lot of films, because I always strive to watch 100 films a year, and I definitely think I'm going to make it to that goal with starting off with 20 plus movies in the first month. My next video should be Puss in Boots: The Last Wish review, which finally came out in the UK after a month-long delay. It came out in the US in December, and I had to watch people talk about this film on TikTok and Twitter and avoid spoilers for a month, nearly 2 months. But I digress. It's here. I watched it, and spoiler alert, it's amazing. So look out for that review. And until then, have a rice day.